Hi, folks. So as we start the research unit, there is going to be a lot of new content to go over. I'm going to try and break it into several videos instead of trying to put it all into one big lecture video for you. This first video is just going to be going over the research unit, explaining what is going to be expected of you for this unit. It's going to be a little different than our previous units. So I'm going to go over those details for you now and answer any questions you might have as they come up. So please feel free to email me throughout this week as you have questions. I'm sure you will have questions. At the top of the unit, you'll see it says, for the final section of the semester, we are going to be combining all of the skills we've learned up until now to form a final literary research paper. Much like the previous papers you have written, you will come up with an argumentative thesis that you support with evidence from the text that you are writing about. However, in this section, you will be incorporating quotes and information from outside sources that you find through research. Research can be a long process, so get started as soon as possible. Here is a link to the MGA library. It's the library's website, which you will be required to use for your research. And obviously, we will go over the assignment instructions in more detail later, but the link to the library's website is there. If you have never used MGA's library website, I highly recommend clicking on that and kind of getting familiar with the website, how to use it. There will be another video going over how to find peer-reviewed sources through the library's website, but obviously practice makes perfect. So if you are unfamiliar with the website, I recommend you just clicking on that link and kind of taking a little stroll through the website, the resources that are there before you kind of engage in any research search. It also says read all the instructions for the research essay assignment before you begin work. This is really crucial so that you understand the project, because if you go ahead and dive into the research, dive into what you hope to be arguing about, you might miss some key details of the research assignment. So it's going to be key that you read all the instructions and understand the project that we're working on first before you begin any research work or any drafting. It might seem like a lot, but all of the requirements for the essay are detailed in the instructions very specifically, so that if you are working on it outside of class, in this case, all of us are working on it outside of class, and you have any questions about the requirements or are unsure of, what next step to take, all of the requirements and expectations for this essay are detailed there very specifically. So on the research tab, there's a ton of resources for you here. The first is the research librarian resource. So I'll open that now. And these are some slides that I've made that kind of quickly go over how to use the MGA's library as a resource. MGA's library's website has lots of access to lots of different resources, so it can be kind of overwhelming. So these slides give you a basic rundown of how you might be able to use it to find some sources for your research. They go over the research process, how the research process happens in stages. You need to have a planning stage before you just dive into research. It's a really good idea to at least come up with some search terms, some ideas for what you might be looking for before you dive into research, so that you're not kind of just blindly reaching for ideas. And then that's when you dive into the active stage, which is scholarly activity, looking for works, looking for sources that might be helpful for you, and then reading those sources. And then here is a visual diagram of the library's website. So here's a picture of the library's website, what it will look like when you go there. And there are two resources that we'll mainly be using. There's ENGL Find, which is what you will use to find books. And then there is Galileo, which is what you will use to find articles. Because we are in a short session class, I'm assuming, and I'm going to suggest that you only look for articles. Not because I don't think that books are helpful, but because it takes a really long time to read books, right? A lot longer than it takes to read an article. So if you are including a source in your research, it's important that you are reading the whole source, and it can take a long time to read a whole book in order to incorporate it into your paper. So make sure that you are reading the whole source when you are finding sources for your essay. And the easiest way to do that is to find articles instead of books. So really Galileo is going to be our best friend when we are looking for sources here. I also have the visual aspect of the research search bar. Like I said, all of this is going to be a little overwhelming for you if you've never used the library's website. So I will make another video on the basics of the library's website. But these slides are here for you if you kind of have already gotten familiar with the library's website, but maybe need a little refresher. And then there are some ways you can narrow your search. So let's go back. There are some videos made by the library. So the research librarians at our library are wonderful. They are really good at their jobs. They all have degrees in library science or library research. So their whole jobs and their whole education has been library research. So they have made their own videos. For example, they have made how to find peer-reviewed journal articles, which I've linked there. They've also had a video, how to search in Galileo. So those two videos are linked here. They're really short and brief. So like I said, if these are things that you have done before and you just kind of need a refresher on, these videos are going to be the useful ones for you. The videos that I post later will be a little bit more in depth. So if you need more in-depth review, or you are entirely blind when it comes to the MGA's website and using the library's resources, that's totally okay. I know some of us have more experience using the library's website than others. I'm going to try and walk you through it in as easy steps as possible so that you can get some experience using it and feel comfortable and confident using it for your essay. The next resource is a kind of an outline for a literary research paper. So obviously I'm not going to go over this, but it's a pretty in-depth outline for what each part of your literary research paper could include. Obviously you are not required to use this specific structure, but if you are a structure-based person, you enjoy or crave structure in your assignments, this might be something that really helps you. I know when I was a student, giving or having someone tell me what each part of my essay needed and how those parts needed to function helped me understand what to include in those sections. So for example, it has the introduction and what each piece of the introduction does. Then it has the background paragraph, if you include one of those. It has the argumentative paragraphs, which are most of your body paragraphs will be argumentative. And then it has your conclusion. And then, you know, obviously your works cited page. There are a few other resources that I have found helpful throughout the years, and my other students have found helpful. So 6 simple steps for writing a research paper. All of these are like handouts or Word documents. There are also some example thesis statements. So I know a couple of us have had some difficulty figuring out the difference between an observation and an argument when it comes to thesis statements. If that is true for you, or if you are still struggling with creating an argumentative thesis statement, these are some good examples in this handout here. And then below that, we have a sample student research essay. I know I provided a sample student poetry essay for you in the poetry unit. These are really strong resources for you. I can't stress enough how important model essays are for you as a student, because you can see other students doing the work successfully, and then you can kind of mirror that in your own work. So this student created a successful research essay. So you can see the parts of the research essay that they have done successfully. I've actually made comments on this one, so you can kind of see the parts that I have commented on that they have done well. Below that is the link to making an appointment with a research librarian, which I'll get into a little bit later. And then obviously the actual instructions for the research essay. So that is how the research unit is outlined, and the assignment is obviously below that. We will go over the assignment instructions in a new video because I don't want this one to be too long, but this is what the research unit is going to look like. To prepare you for this unit, obviously it's going to be our longest unit, and our final draft of the research essay, which is also going to suffice as our final essay, will be due on June 14th at midnight. And then our grades will be turned in pretty swiftly after that. So it's really important that you get those in on time so that I can have them graded and then final grades turned in. So if you have any questions about the research unit, or as I'm going through these videos, if you have any questions about the assignment instructions, any of these resources that I've outlined here, please feel free to email me. I would much rather hear from you than not hear from you if you are feeling lost or confused. So please reach out, okay? Remember that my email is cassie.outler@mga.edu. I'd be happy to hear from you and set up a meeting if we need to talk about anything. So I'm gonna hop to the next video where we go over the assignment instructions.